The American people are going to have to choose between the Bill of Rights and the Thomas Committee. They cannot have both. One or the other must be abolished in the immediate future.
The Hollywood 10 went from being celebrated filmmakers at the top of Hollywood to being imprisoned with crushed careers. How did they get there? Was it a true crime or simply party affiliation? The root of this high-profile case lay in the atmosphere of a Cold War anti-communist nation. The Hollywood 10, fanning the flames of anti-communism to stifle communication. Tensions heightened between the United States and the Soviet Union after World War II. Communism in the Soviet Union in the 1940s seemed like the opposite of all American ideals. The government owned all industries and property, and private ownership of property was forbidden. Religion was rejected, and decisions were made mostly by state rulers. This was a stark contrast from the United States' democratic, individualistic principles.
So America comes out of the Second World War more powerful and prosperous than any nation on the planet. And you can see why people would want to preserve that prosperity and freedom in the face of this menace from the Soviet Union.
Americans became increasingly concerned that the Soviet threat wasn't isolated in Russia, but secretly promoted by communist moles living as U.S. citizens. The concern fell into the hands of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Also known as HUAC, the committee was established to investigate internal communism and to expel any anti-American organizations. In 1946, the House of Representatives flipped, and the Republican Party took control. J. Parnell Thomas, a New Jersey House member, became the new chairman of the committee. Critics accused him of being a social climber, and HUAC certainly provided him with an opportunity to gain popularity. It became his goal to revitalize HUAC, and he immediately began a vigorous campaign to expose communism, setting his sights on Hollywood. Hollywood was in its golden age in the 1940s. Movie production, success, and influence were unparalleled. But it was precisely Hollywood's influence that concerned Thomas. Movies, having an audience that stretched coast to coast, had the power to spread new ideas. HUAC feared that movies could be used as a medium to spread the communist ideology.
We know that movies matter. Movies are great transmission belts for ideology. So the one thing the House Un-American Activities Committee gets right is we all know movies are important. And of course, you can yoke the anti-communist impulse with our obsession with Hollywood cinema and get a lot of publicity.
In May of 1946, Thomas, Representatives John McDowell, and freshman Congressman Richard M. Nixon flew to Los Angeles in hopes to uncover details about the suspected communist infiltration. They came back with a list of names. The following September, Thomas released subpoenas to 43 Hollywood screenwriters, actors, directors, and producers to appear in Washington. HUAC developed a plan that would not only display the findings of their private investigation, but give them a national spotlight. On October 21, 1947, the Congressional hearings into the American film industry began.
Investigating alleged communist influence and infiltration in the moving picture industry.
At the head of the caucus room were the 10 members of the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Opposite was a group of 10 Hollywood writers and filmmakers, summoned from Hollywood, suspected of being communists. Most importantly, major radio stations and news networks were crowded into the room. The media was the vessel of communication that would spread the divisive anti-communist message from D.C. to the rest of America. The first week of the trial was dedicated to what Thomas called the friendly witnesses. They denounced communism in Hollywood and accused others of spreading communist propaganda. It was all based on rumors and suspicions.
The Communist Party in the United States should be outlawed by the Congress of the United States. It's a conspiracy to take over our government by force.
I personally certainly do believe that the Communist Party should be outlawed. However, I'm not an expert on politics or of what the reaction would be. If I had my way about it, they'd all be sent back to Russia or some other unpleasant place.
In the second week of the hearings, the unfriendly witnesses took the stand. It was their opportunity to defend themselves against the accusations, and it was HUAC's opportunity to prove that the unfriendly witnesses were in fact communists.
We want to know what strategic positions in the industry have been captured by these elements, whose loyalty is pledged in word and deed to the interests of a foreign power.
The unfriendly witnesses were actors, producers, and screenwriters. Many of them won notable awards for their contributions and were commended for conveying themes of equality, diversity, and unity in their films. They believed that the trial violated their First Amendment rights.
So the great constitutional issue in October of 1947, when HUAC begins its hearings into alleged communist subversion in Hollywood, is whether Congress actually has the right to interrogate you about your political beliefs or associations.
The difference between these congressional hearings and judicial hearings was that HUAC didn't have to follow judicial law. Thomas and his committee sculpted their own process. HUAC was therefore able to block the witnesses' most important strategies. First, the attorneys for the unfriendly witnesses tried to eliminate the subpoenas. HUAC said no. The attorneys then requested to cross-examine, which was essential to refute the accusations. Again, HUAC said no. When the first witness, John Howard Lawson, was called to the stand, the committee did not allow him to read his prepared statement. A judicial court would be impartial, but HUAC was blatantly not. HUAC's major question was, are you a member of the Communist Party? The question was not easy to answer. The FBI had compiled files on all witnesses. If Lawson said no, he was not a communist, the committee could charge him with perjury based on the evidence that he was. If he said yes, the committee would demand names of other members.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
The question of communism is in no way related to this inquiry, which is an attempt to get control of the screen and to invade the basic rights of American citizens in all fields. This committee is attempting to establish the right, which is historically denied to any committee of this sort.
Lawson answered the question in his own way, stating that HUAC did not have the authority to inquire about his political beliefs. 10 witnesses were called to the stand over the course of the week.
And they didn't want to shut up. They actually wanted to take on the congressman and to oppose the congressional hearings, the very basis of the hearings. So they wanted to have an argument.
Each one of the witnesses followed Lawson's approach. None of them admitted to being members of the Communist Party. They became known as the Hollywood 10. Because the 10 refused to answer the committee's questions, they were cited for contempt of Congress.
In contempt of Congress.
The House of Representatives voted to convict the Hollywood 10 of contempt. All 10 were sentenced up to a year in prison and fined $1,000. Major movie studio heads gathered in New York to create a solution to the negative publicity. To clear their names, they fired the Hollywood 10 and created a blacklist. The list blocked any suspected communists from employment. Even once the Hollywood 10 served their prison time, they still paid the price.
The studios say there is no blacklist at all. It's a dirty word with them. However, over 250 people have received notices from the studios that they are no longer employable in motion pictures, and I was one of the first. I think it's a blacklist.
But the list of names didn't stop with the Hollywood 10. The blacklist grew for over a decade as more actors and filmmakers were accused of communist infiltration. The blacklist led to a widespread anti-communist focus in the media. People could no longer share sympathies for the Hollywood 10 without threatening their own reputation. Following the trial, the new question facing America was, what is more important, preventing communism or maintaining the personal freedoms of citizens? HUAC's influence waned in the 1950s, but the committee set the stage for the McCarthy era. Like HUAC, McCarthy also used the media as a tool to amplify his anti-communist agenda. The ability to openly communicate is fundamental to American society. It allows for a flow of ideas, but the fear of communism halted America's freedom to openly communicate their views, perpetuated by the trial of the Hollywood 10 and the subsequent blacklist.